Hello my reptilian friends, I'm Azalea, and today we're carrying on with more Her Love Like Poison. Last time we were here, our main character was missing the church girl just a little bit after she tried working on her thesis and then just didn't, and instead watched a lot of Supernatural apparently. We then had a small run-in with her old teacher, Mr. Brown, who very not subtly tried warning us about the forest and the church. But we still went anyway, so let's carry on from where we last left off. The trees eventually began to thin out, and soon Ethel emerged into the moonlit clearing where St. Catherine sat. The church didn't exactly loom out of the darkness. It wasn't grand enough for that, but it had a somber, reassuringly solid presence regardless. Ethel didn't know quite how old the church was, but Rowan was something of a history buff, and he had told her about it once before. Rowan was a hands-on kind of person, unlike Manny, and he spent a lot of his free time going on rambles around Oxbury and the fields which surrounded it. Rowan did etchings of the graves, and he liked to take photos of them, all little grey lozenges which were stained with lichen and crumbling, ever so gently, around the edges. The parish council might have dissuaded teenagers from hanging out in the churchyard, for fear they would desecrate the graves and leave cigarette butts strewn in their wake, but Rowan wasn't like that. At 17 years of age, he was one of the kindest, most conscientious teenage boys Ethel knew. Which wasn't saying much, given Rowan was one of the only teenage boys she knew, but still. If Rowan had been there, he could have told her when the church had been constructed, down to the exact year. He could have told her about the history of the stained glass window, which Ethel had always thought a curious addition for such a small, humble church. He probably knew when the window had been installed, and who it depicted, and he probably could have told her the name of the glazier who'd made the damned thing. But Rowan wasn't there. He was in Australia, with Lauren and Jude and Manny, and though he'd shared these nuggets of information with Ethel once, she had already forgotten all of it. Ethel felt a brief flicker of guilt over her awful memory. What a callous big sister she was. But all thoughts of Rowan soon dissipated as she took a step toward the church. Its wooden door was ajar. It was only ajar by a small crack, a hair's breadth, in fact, but it was enough to instill in Ethel hope anew. Maybe the girl really was there. Was she waiting for her? Ethel pushed the door open just a notch, then slipped inside the church. The sound of the old door opening seemed uncomfortably loud in the near-total silence, and it rent the air quite clumsily. Ethel winced as she heard its low, obnoxious creaking, which sounded like the malcontented rumblings of a mighty whale's stomach. She hadn't wanted to spoil the magic of the girl's singing, but it was too late. The silence had been broken. Ethel knew that the girl would soon turn her head, and she did. The girl turned, her dark hair fluttering, half melted into the darkness, as though her head was made of shadows. She took a step forward, her skirt swishing, and said, "Ethel, I was wondering if I would see you again. I was getting so bored and lonely waiting for you." "You were?" "Of course I was. I asked if you would see me again, didn't I?" Oh, yes. So you did." It was true enough that the girl had asked this during their last meeting, but Ethel hadn't really believed in it. She hadn't thought that the girl cared. Why would she? She was beautiful, while Ethel was... "With you here, this old church feels a lot more homey. Now then." The girl took a seat on one of the pews, then patted the empty space beside her. "Won't you sit down? There's an awful lot I'd like to ask you. I only managed to scrape the surface last time." "You're still such an enigma to me. I could call you Miss Mystery." "I think I could say the same about you. I still don't know your name." "All in good time. First, I want to ask about you. What's your story? Story? Ethel frowned. I don't think I really have one. Oh, don't be silly. Everybody has a story. You hardly grew out of the ground, did you? Like a turnip? Well, no. Then you must have a story to share. Parents, grandparents, maybe some siblings. Hey, didn't you say you had a couple of brothers? I do, yeah. Manny and Rowan. They're both younger than me. And? What are they like? Manny is... he's... well... Ethel paused. How could she put this tactfully? It was hard to talk about her feelings about Manny while trying to maintain a veneer of politeness. Manny himself wasn't a very polite person. Manny was practically glued to his PC. He had been banned from numerous lobbies for using words he really shouldn't have, and he swore and swaggered around the house as though he owned the place. He padded about the kitchen barefoot, sometimes shirtless. He talked with his mouth full at the breakfast table, and the only person he ever listened to was Jude. Manny thought everybody else was uncool, Ethel in particular, because she was shy and awkward, and she'd had awful acne in her last year of secondary school, and because she played the violin. He's a typical teenager. Does that mean he's a pain in the neck? He can be. And what about your other brother? Rowan's lovely. He's not like Manny at all. He's very quiet, actually, and mostly keeps to himself. Mum's been a bit worried about him, as it happens. Yeah? Yeah, she thinks he's being bullied at school, maybe. But if he is, he'd never tell. He doesn't like to talk about it. Maybe he's afraid Manny will make fun of him. I thought he was more worried that Mum would make a fuss. But maybe. Teenage boys can be like that. They have a lot of pride, even. No, especially the quiet ones. Some of the boys I had to deal with at school were such wankers. The girl scoffed dismissively, then said, So, what about your parents? Didn't you say yesterday you weren't all that close? It's complicated. My mum means well. I know she wants me to be happy, but... But? I don't think she understands what would really make me happy. And I don't think she understands me either. Doesn't she try? She does. She paid for my violin lessons, though she doesn't see the point in classical music. She says it's boring. And she was supportive when I said I wanted to study English Lit. She didn't try to make me change my mind, or like some people's parents would have. She didn't tell me I should study something useful instead, like mathematics or medicine or, I don't know, physics. But she didn't seem to really get it either. I take it your mother doesn't read a lot then? She doesn't read at all, unless you count women's magazines. I thought I was just constipated, but then I gave birth in the toilet bowl. Those sorts of magazines? Ethel nodded. My mother and I aren't very alike. I gathered. She doesn't sound like the sensitive sort, not like you. Do you think I'm sensitive? It's the impression I'm getting, yeah. I mean, you stuck around to listen to me singing. It sounds like your mother would have told me to shut up, that I was giving her a headache. I don't think she would have said that. My mother isn't cruel. Though Lauren could be blunt. Lauren had made many careless remarks about Ethel's appearance before, quips to the tune of, God, you aren't going to go dressed out like that, are you? Ethel knew that Lauren didn't mean any ill by it. She was probably trying to show an interest in her only daughter. But sometimes, the way her mother looked at her hurt. Lauren was nice to Ethel because Ethel was her daughter. But Ethel knew that if her mother had been one of her peers, a Shania or an Imogen or a Morgan back in school, she would have teased her relentlessly. Lauren, with her peroxide blonde hair and her French manicured nails, had probably made any number of frumpy, unfashionable girls cry when she'd been a student. Lauren might never have made a conscious effort to upset her only daughter, but she definitely made Ethel cry on more than one occasion. Cruel or not, it doesn't sound like she takes much of an interest in you. We just like different things. It happens. We might be related, but that doesn't mean we'll have similar interests. And what is she into, then? Love Island and TikTok, mostly. Love Island? It's a reality TV show. It's awful. Contestants are all horrid, but I think that's why my mother likes it so much. I tried watching it with her, but it felt like gawping at animals in a zoo. Or gladiators in an Olympic coliseum, out for one another's blood. Right, so your mum's hopeless. And your dad? He's your typical dad, I guess. Meaning? He likes football and Formula 1, and his favorite band is Iron Maiden. He does woodworking and DIY, and he can play the guitar too. Oh, so he's a creative then? In a way. He was in a couple of local bands when he was younger, but they never went anywhere. I don't think he resents it though, he was just having fun. Dad asked me once before why I bothered practicing the violin so much, when it was obvious I'd never get anywhere with it. He didn't. He did. He said if he'd not been able to get anywhere with his band, there's no way I'd be able to make it. I mean, he was playing punk and I'm doing classical, so... He shouldn't have said that, whether he was right or not. It was uncalled for. Some people like to perform for their own sakes. You don't need to be popular to make your pursuits worthwhile. That's what I said. And Dad said it was a good thing I got something out of the hideous screeching my violin made, because he sure as hell didn't. Wow, he sounds like an asshole. He's just insensitive. He isn't that bad, really. He was rude about your hobbies, no, your passions. I think that's plenty bad, especially coming from your father. I thought parents were supposed to support their children. There are lots of different parents in this world, and a lot of different children. I don't think I'm quite what either my mother or my father wanted. Yeah. Well, parents can't choose their kids, but kids can't choose their parents either. I doubt you would have been stuck with them if you could decide, would you? Well, Ethel thought of her real parents, the neatly groomed Lauren and the wannabe rocker Jude. Then she thought of the parents she had imagined for herself while growing up. A sweet, sensitive couple who appreciated the arts and who encouraged Ethel in her musical pursuits. She thought of the upbringing she could have had, a Parisian apartment which overlooked Avenue Montaigne, and sighed wistfully. I guess not. I thought as much. Your folks sound rotten. They're not so bad. But it is nice being able to talk about my interests with somebody who seems to care. Well, of course I care. Why wouldn't I? The girl pouted, adopting the tempestuous tone of a Celtic warrior queen of centuries past. You're interesting. I'm not so sure about that. You might not be, but I am. I wouldn't bother talking to you otherwise. I don't suffer fools gladly, you know. I don't like spending time with people who tire me, and you most definitely don't do that. I enjoy listening to your stories. I enjoy listening to you. Goodness, I think I'd enjoy simply sitting with you, even without talking. Your company is very soothing. Oh, I doubt that. You'd get bored of me eventually. When I'm with you. The girl grinned, a cheeky grin which was less Celtic warrior queen and more Cockney Victorian chimney sweep. Never. I'm certain of that, and I'm sticking to it. Why do you look so unsure, though? Haven't people ever told you that you're interesting before? Not really. Well, people are stupid. You shouldn't pay attention to what they think, or don't think in this case, because it doesn't sound like they have any sensible thoughts rattling around in their thick skulls. They're too empty-headed to realize something truly special when they see it. Ethel didn't reply. She was starting to feel too overwhelmed. The girl's words were so forceful, Ethel felt oddly breathless in their wake, stunned into silence. Ethel had never before been given any cause to think she was anything special. In fact, it was quite the opposite. But you're too nice, that's your problem. You have a hard time standing up to people. When they ignore you or overlook you or underestimate you, you roll over and accept it. You don't want to cause a fuss, so you agree with all the negative things people say about you, even things that are blatantly false. You're so afraid of causing any offense, you don't know how to properly live your own life. But I think that makes you special too, in a sense. It means that you're very kind. You're a lot kinder than I am, at least. I'd never let anybody insult me like that. The girl leant in as she spoke, cupping both of Ethel's cheeks with her hands. The girl's skin might have been cold, almost inhumanly so, but the words which poured from her lips were so warm, they made Ethel's body tingle. It was a dark, cold night, but she was beginning to blush. Ethel couldn't help but be self-conscious about this. If Shania were there, she would have pounced on even the smallest sign of weakness, but the girl didn't use it against Ethel. She wasn't trying to hurt her. Her voice was even sweeter than honey as she said, "But maybe that's why we get along so well. You can make up for what I lack. And maybe I can make up for what you lack too." What I lack? The girl nodded. "If you can't tell people what you want, then I'll have to do it for you." "And what makes you think that you know what I want?" "Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea. You might be bad at being honest with your true feelings, verbally at least, but they show up regardless, all over your pretty little face." Pretty? Yes, that's right. I think you're very pretty. And you're really easy to read, too. It's so obvious what's going on inside that dome of yours. The girl leant in even closer, the tip of her nose brushing against Ethel's. She inhaled. Then, she said, her voice newly playful, "And I think that's very cute. If you're going to act like this, then you don't leave me with much choice. I'll simply have to kiss you." The girl shifted closer to Ethel as she spoke, her fingers still splayed against Ethel's cheeks, effectively affixing her head in place. The girl might have been skinny, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Ethel could feel her fingertips digging into her skull with such intensity it hurt. Ethel trembled, her eyes a little too large as the girl brought their lips closer. She exhaled, and when she did, Ethel felt the girl's breath ghost against her cheeks. Maybe it was just Ethel's imagination, but for a few moments, Ethel thought she could smell something subtly off about the girl's breath. There was something almost old about the air which brushed against Ethel's cheeks, if age indeed had a smell. It put Ethel in mind of an old person's home, the same one her great-uncle had been sequestered away in when his health had begun to deteriorate, and he could no longer shuffle around his bungalow without stumbling over his own slippered feet. Ethel had only visited her great-uncle a handful of times in the old person's home, despite her mother's frequent invitations that she tag along. She hadn't liked it. All of those old men and women had upset Ethel, their faces wrinkled and their wizened fingers gripping the armrests of their chairs, their skin shrunk down to the bone. Everything in the old person's home had been brown, the floors, the walls, and the chairs. And though it had been scrubbed clean from top to bottom with Lysol, there had been a pervasive stench which cut beneath the clinical cleanliness. The air had smelt unpleasantly rank, just like mildew. It had reeked of rapidly impending death, impossible to staunch. And the girl's breath was just like that. There was a perplexing wrongness to it which made Ethel's skin prickle. All of a sudden, Ethel wanted to pull away. But then the girl's mouth was upon her, her lips wet and warm and yielding. And this didn't smell wrong. The girl's tongue was inoffensive as it slid between Ethel's parted lips, as was the saliva which coated it. Ethel couldn't find any reason to squirm away from her. If anything, she would far rather squirm against her, so she did. Ethel felt the girl's tongue exploring her mouth, slowly at first, but she moved more vigorously as the seconds elapsed, and Ethel made no attempt to push her away. Ethel felt as if her skin was prickling with static electricity. Ethel had kissed the girl before. This was nothing new. But she had never kissed her quite like this before. It was intense enough to leave her head reeling, intense enough to render her breathless. Speaking of her breath, Ethel soon realized that she had been holding it. Her lungs were burning. Was kissing supposed to hurt quite this much? Ethel had never been kissed quite this intensely before, not by Clementine. Their makeout sessions were now beginning to seem almost demure, even when they had escalated to roving hands beneath shirts, roving hands between thighs. The girl had yet to take her hands from Ethel's face, but her kisses were unlike anything Ethel had ever known before. They were intense and driving, so much so it was scary. But it was exciting too. Ethel's blood was beginning to fizz inside her veins like cream soda. Her head, meanwhile, felt light. But her lungs were still burning. This was no good. She had to get some air in her. Otherwise, Ethel was afraid she would asphyxiate, drowning in her own pleasure like a rat in a vat of soup. Ethel drew back from the kiss. Her face daubed bright red with an intense, almost angry blush, which looked like a sunburn. Her chest was rising and falling from the effort of trying to inhale enough air which felt strangely light and sparse, as it might at the heady peak of a towering mountain. Ethel's lips were damp from the girl's kisses, and her head was hammering from the intensity of them. It was a cool night, but her palms felt uncomfortably sweaty. Surreptitiously, Ethel tried to wipe her palms on her skirt. All the while, she felt like a fool. Why was she so worked up about a kiss, of all things? It was hardly her first, but she'd never felt anything like this before. It felt just like a dream. Did you like that, then? The girl addressed Ethel directly, her eyes boring into Ethel's as if Ethel were her prey, the girl, predator. It wasn't too much for you, was it? Ethel didn't know. Everything seemed like too much in that moment. Even existing seemed a difficult art, especially when her breathing was so very labored. She felt as she had back in secondary school, flagging behind her classmates in the middle of cross-country. Her heart wouldn't stop hammering. The girl's affection had been far too cloying as she'd poured it into Ethel's mouth. Her kisses sweet like molasses, like candy floss, like cherry pie. It was all too much. It was too overwhelming. But, by the same token, it wasn't enough. Ethel wanted more of the girl, more of her fingers in her hair and her mouth against her own. And maybe the girl could see this, though Ethel was too ashamed to say it, because she giggled. Good girl. I'm glad you've warmed up to me so much. I do wish you'd say a little more, though, to put me at my ease. But that's all right. The girl spoke softly, caressing Ethel's damp lower lip with her index finger as she did. You don't need to talk, not when we're together. I'm not interested in hearing more about your awful parents and your obnoxious brothers. There's plenty I can learn about you from just kissing you. The whimpers that you make are rather informative. And so is the way you shudder against me. It's utterly adorable. I have no idea why your girlfriend dumped you. She must have had awful taste. Huh? Groggily, Ethel blinked, as though awaking from a dream. Her eyelids felt awfully heavy, as though they had been weighing down with lead, but she was still able to pick out the girl's features in the dark, her face looming centimeters away from her own. What was that about her girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend rather? Had Ethel told the girl about Clementine? She couldn't remember doing that, but she couldn't remember much of anything other than hands and teeth and lips and tongues, and grasping fingers and soft, breathy sighs. Her thoughts were all a jumble. Shh, it's all right. I know she hurts you, but you don't need to think about her now. You don't need to think about anything. All you need to do is focus on me. I'm not cruel, not like her. I won't abandon you. I like you. The girl leant in, her lips parted, red lips like cherries, which were a little slick from Ethel's saliva. She was so close, Ethel could feel herself inhaling the air that the girl exhaled, taking in her breath and stripping it of oxygen. Ethel was reminded, as the girl caressed her, of the cyclical snake which ate its own tail. What was it called? Ethel had known it once, but she couldn't remember. And I'm going to keep on liking you. Had the girl's eyes always been so dark? No matter what, that's just the sort of person I am. It was with a light giggle, one which sounded oddly eerie, that the girl leant in anew, to reclaim Ethel's lips with her own. Ethel gasped at the kiss, though it wasn't, at this point, a surprise. She had expected it. The girl had kissed her innumerable times already, after all, that night. So much so, Ethel couldn't keep count of it. Ethel still found herself squirming, however, at this new volley of intense kisses. Ethel felt the girl's teeth nip at her lower lip, too incessant to be truly teasing, while the fingers of her right hand cupped her cheek. The fingers of the girl's left hand, meanwhile, seemed imbued with a newfound restlessness. They began to roam, slipping beneath the hem of Ethel's sensible sweater, and then... Ethel shuddered, her nerve endings aflame, as the girl's palm pressed against her newly bared skin. The girl's touch was cold enough to be glacial. It felt like icy needles were being inserted beneath the skin. Sharp, pointed needles, which drove the air clean from Ethel's body. The further the kisses progressed, the greater Ethel's deterioration became. Her eyelids flickered. Though she had her eyes opened, the girl was so close Ethel couldn't see very much of her. In the dark of the night, the girl seemed an amorphous being made of teeming shadows, something which wasn't wholly human. Ethel whimpered helplessly against the girl's mouth, her whole body aflame. An uncomfortable sort of dread had begun to crawl up Ethel's spine. It was cold and creeping, and it left her paralyzed, completely incapable of moving. For a few moments, Ethel could only sit there, accepting the girl's kisses, but no longer reciprocating them. The girl's tongue felt a thick, heavy sort of thing in her mouth, like a slab of leather, and Ethel was filled with a sudden desire to bite down upon it. Her shoulders shook. She didn't want this. It was all happening too quickly. The girl's fingers roamed higher still beneath Ethel's shirt, and Ethel jolted. Her eyes widened. Then, she shifted back, breaking the kiss with such suddenness it seemed almost akin to violence. I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude. It's just, that this is all so sudden. Oh? The girl examined Ethel, her head cocked to one side like a curious robin. Her lips curled into a smirk and, her voice slightly amused, she said, "What's this? Don't tell me you're coming over all shy." No, it's just... Ethel looked away from the girl, newly incapable of meeting her gaze. Who was she, anyway? Ethel still didn't know her name. She could have been a serial killer for all Ethel knew, a shadowy stranger who seduced hapless young girls. Not that Ethel herself was so young, not anymore, then led them to their deaths. This seemed a bit of a far-fetched assumption, but the girl had been singing when Ethel had first seen her. Wasn't that something the sirens did in Greek myths of old? The sirens were beautiful women with long, curling hair and glistening tails, who had perched prettily upon their rocks, calling out to passing sailors. They had drowned more than a few hapless men that way, reducing their boats to pulped driftwood on the pointed, impersonal rocks. Ethel herself was no sailor, but she felt as though she was drowning. Her lungs might very well have been full of fetid, muddied water, and the longer she sat with the girl, the more intense this feeling became. Ethel pressed her fingers against her lips. They were tingling, her fingers and her lips both. Her brow, meanwhile, felt cold and clammy. Ah. The girl, evidently taking Ethel's silence as a tacit confession that yes, she was feeling shy, giggled. That's very cute. You keep saying that, but am I really, cute? Of course. You've got to be a little bit cute, or else I wouldn't like kissing you so much. In fact, I've become quite taken with you. It's a bit of a shame you decided to cut our little rendezvous short. Rendezvous? Was that how the girl wanted to term it? How delightfully European. It almost made what they had done before, the girl's tongue shoved inside Ethel's mouth, seem cultured. But it's all right. I wouldn't want to push you. Not too much, at least. So, I'll play nice for now. I won't demand too much from you, although... The girl's smile widened until, modulated by the shadows, it looked uncanny. If you care for me at least. Let's say 1/5 as much as I care for you. You shouldn't play games with my poor heart. Blowing hot and cold will only keep my interest for so long, and we won't have much time together, not after today. I wouldn't want you to wind up missing me too much. It'd be a shame if you never got to say everything you want to say, or do everything you want to do. Here the girl raised her eyebrows suggestively, in a manner which didn't seem quite in keeping with her heart-shaped face. So you might as well make the most of things, or at least try to. Don't they say it's better to regret the things you've done than the things you've not done? It was a saying Ethel was familiar with, but she didn't hold much stock in it. There were a lot of things she'd done during her short life that she wished, in retrospect, she hadn't. She wished she hadn't plucked up the courage to hold Clementine's hand for the very first time, when they'd both gone to the cinema to watch some mindless superhero movie. She wished that she hadn't had the wild idea of asking Clementine out on a date, once the film had ended and the credits had started rolling. And she wished that Clementine, giggling, hadn't said, "What's this? I thought we already are on a date." If a relationship had never begun between the pair of them, then Ethel never would have known how much it hurt when a relationship fell apart, one that you cared about. She regretted that rather a lot. Sometimes, Ethel wished she could scrub her mind clean of their entire relationship. All the late-night texting, the trips to the movies, the sleepovers in Clementine's dorm room, which had felt bigger than Ethel's. But maybe some good had come out of their short-lived relationship after all. For a few months, at least, Ethel had been really, truly happy. When she'd been Clementine's girlfriend, she hadn't felt at all lonely. This loneliness had returned full force, however, once everything had come to an end. But what was done was done. There was no sense dwelling on it. For the present, she existed in the here and now, on a pew in Oxbury's church with the girl, and that was good enough for her. In any case, hadn't the girl said something rather strange? "What do you mean we don't have much time left to spend together?" "Exactly what I said. My parents will be coming to pick me up soon. Tomorrow's my last full day here. I'll be gone on Monday morning." Oh. Ethel hadn't expected that. Though why she hadn't expected it, she was unsure. The girl had told her earlier, hadn't she, that she wasn't staying in Oxbury indefinitely. She was just visiting. She had made it quite apparent that she couldn't wait to be rid of the place, a sentiment Ethel shared. If she could have escaped Oxbury, she would have. It felt oppressive. It did seem awfully sudden, though, that the girl had announced her departure now, so soon after they'd met. Ethel had only known the girl for 2 days, or nights rather. They'd barely had a chance to talk. Hell, they'd barely had a chance to speak. The girl had been so aggressive when it came to kissing her. Very little in the way of actual conversation had passed between them during the last 15 minutes. Now, it seemed unlikely that Ethel would ever see the girl again. There. The girl, perhaps sensing Ethel's anxiety, let her hand rest atop Ethel's own. She smiled gently and said, "We have one more day, at least, to share all of our dirty little secrets with one another. So don't worry, this isn't the end. Who knows, it might even be a new beginning." A new what? Ethel was stuck on the girl's words. They were rather corny, when the girl leaned in. Then, the girl pressed her lips against Ethel's cheek. The kiss was a fleeting one, of a magnitude less intense than those she had previously bestowed upon her partner, but Ethel still blushed. She simply couldn't help herself, not around the girl. She was hopeless. "I don't mind giving you my phone number, or my address. Heck, I'd even give you my national insurance number if you wanted it." I don't think you need to go quite that far." "I thought not. Still, I want to show you how serious I'm being about this. I'm serious about us." Us? Was there an us? That was news to Ethel. "But you have to make a bit of an effort too, alright? If you want to keep seeing me, then I need to test your resolve. It's like a quest from a fairy tale, you know? Not that I'm as sadistic as the princesses from those. I won't have you scouring the ends of the earth for golden apples, or slaying any dragons. What I want is much more manageable. You just need to come to the church and see me tomorrow night, like you usually do. Do you think you can manage that? Do say that you will. I hate for things to end like this." The girl looked at Ethel, her gaze poignant and her lips pursed. And, as Ethel stared at the girl's pretty face, she found herself incapable of looking away. She was spellbound. Thoughts of the girl were Ethel's constant companions as she navigated the forest's twisting paths, and as she emerged from the thicket of trees which surrounded her. These thoughts percolated inside her skull as she went her way through Oxbury's street, until she returned to the nondescript lane where her parents' house was situated. Ethel thought of the girl as her fingers fumbled for her keys, and she thought of the girl as she pushed the front door inwards with a click. She thought of her as she bent to unlace her shoes, and as she ascended the stairs with a series of heavy, lumbering footfalls. She thought of the girl as she drew a bath. Ethel had always liked having baths, and it was nice being able to fill the tub so late at night, without having to worry about waking her parents, and as she submerged herself, nymph-like, in the warm water. Ethel had run the water hot on purpose. She liked her baths to be scalding. Hot enough that the sensitive skin on her soles began to prune, and her face turned pink, and she could feel it permeating her pores. She curled up inside the tub like a newborn, shivering as the ceramic pressed against her skin. The hot water was soothing, as was the sound of the water as it rippled around her. But, though she was now far away from the forest, and from the church which dwelt within it, Ethel's thoughts had yet to stray from the girl. Still, she thought of her, turning her visage over and over in her head as a child might play with pebbles on the beach. The girl had overtaken her thoughts entirely, seemed in fact to have permeated through Ethel's skin and into the core of her very being. Ethel's bones ached for the girl, and so did her muscles. Ethel's thoughts were becoming vague, a side effect of the bathwater, which she might have run a bit too hot after all. Steam was rising from the undulating surface of the water. It misted over the bathroom mirror, and the silvery taps on the end of the tub. Ethel's flushed cheeks were starting to prickle with moisture. When she blinked, a pearly bead of sweat was dislodged from her left eyelid. Slowly, it trickled down her nose, and Ethel brushed it away. Ethel's body felt as though it was burning, but this wasn't wholly the fault of the water. The heat wasn't an external thing, sloshing against her thighs and her stomach and the curve of her back. It seemed to be inside her too. It had infiltrated her. These thoughts of the girl, with her lithe, lean body and her dark hair, were so overwhelming, they were almost intimidating. Like the particularly sadistic parasites which infested insects, to have them climb to conspicuous places so they could be consumed by predators. Ethel too felt her body moving. She was hardly conscious of what she was doing. It was very late at night, and she was tired, and the bathwater was so very warm. As her hand shifted, Ethel's left hand found one of her breasts, a full curve of supple flesh which was damp from the bathwater. Ethel had never liked her breasts very much. She had, in fact, considered them a constant source of shame ever since she had been a young girl. They had swollen much more quickly than the rest of her female classmates, even when she had been in primary school. Lauren had taken her bra shopping when she had only been 9 years old, much to Ethel's chagrin. The other girls her age, the Shanias and the Imogenes and the Morgans of the world, had still been playing hopscotch in the playground and tying one another's hair in uneven pigtails. Ethel, meanwhile, had to go bra shopping with her mother. She was the first in her class to wear a bra, and she felt like it had marked her. The ugly beige flesh harness had made her stand out when she tried to change for PE class among the other girls. Shania and Morgan had both giggled when they had seen Ethel's bra, as though it was something shameful, as though they themselves would never need to wear a bra one day. That had been nothing new for Ethel, however. Even at the tender age of 9 and some change, Ethel had been tragically accustomed to the teasing from her other classmates. She hadn't been prepared for the boys to gang up on her too, however. There'd been one boy in particular, Aidan Yates. who'd found Ethel's new bra supremely fascinating. He'd sat behind Ethel in class, and he'd soon taken to twanging the elastic on the back of her bra beneath her demure yellow and white checked school dress, so the band snapped against Ethel's skin. This had hurt her, though, worse than any physical discomfort, it had been humiliating. She had been so very humiliated by this, she hadn't been able to tell Mr. Brown about Aidan. She hadn't wanted to draw even more attention to her bra, or to her breasts, which she had despised. Ethel had been on the receiving end of jeers and catcalls from men twice her age in the street, before she had been in double digits. It had been a miserable experience, one which had made her resent her body. Even now, when Ethel had grown and the rest of her body had filled out to the degree she no longer looked as horribly disproportionate as she had as a child, Ethel still loathed her breasts. If she could have, she would have clawed them from her body like lumps of clay or lumps of dough. Ethel couldn't do that, however. All she could do was endure them, and that was precisely what Ethel had tried to do. She had endured and endured and endured, never much liking the cumbersome cage of flesh she had been trapped in. But it wasn't resentment which prompted Ethel to massage her breasts now, rolling them between the pads of her palms, and pinching her nipples between her fingertips. Her actions were not those of a woman who wanted to surgically remove the bags of fat which swayed on her chest. They were reverent instead, almost worshipful. Ethel's index finger rubbed at one of her nipples, which was slick from the bathwater, and a jolt of electricity coursed down her spine. Her back arched, water sopping against the inside of the tub. Ethel had touched herself before. As much as she disliked her body, she wasn't necessarily afraid of it, but she couldn't recall it ever feeling quite like this. She'd never been quite this thorough when she had been giving herself pleasure in the past. Typically, Ethel masturbated only to get the act over and done with, so she could do more productive things with her time. Things which were decidedly less embarrassing. Ethel wasn't asexual, at least she didn't think that she was, but she'd never enjoyed masturbating very much. She had the urge to touch herself, but the urge was a fleeting one, and when it did come, she didn't like to linger upon it. She didn't like to indulge. Her reservation stemmed, in part, because she didn't like to look at herself naked. She thought she looked hideous. Maybe she didn't think that her body deserved pleasure. That might have been why she had always denied herself. The sheer size of her breasts, however, which were too large to cup in one hand, didn't seem to matter very much at the moment. Moans were beginning to spill from Ethel's lips. Moans which, during other circumstances, she would have tried to stifle. The sounds of her own enjoyment embarrassed her. Everything about her body embarrassed her, but maybe it was time she overcame her anxieties. She was already 21, for goodness' sake. If she didn't learn how to like herself, how could anybody else? That was what Clementine had said during their last and most explosive argument. "I'm trying to be here for you," Clementine had said, her face blotchy with emotion. "But how can I, when you always push me away? I tell you that I like you, but it never sticks. It's like you're determined to hate yourself. How am I supposed to love you when you're always so negative? It's such a drag. I've been doing my best, but..." But Ethel didn't want to think about Clementine. Not right now. She would far rather think of the girl. Her ex-girlfriend was now a blip of a half-recalled memory on her radar, and Ethel soon shut these thoughts down, terminating them with the finality she used to stop herself from dwelling on her thesis. It was better to forget, to drift away inside her own memories, to daydream. Ethel moved her right hand now, sliding it between her thighs, and, as she did, she imagined that it was the girl touching her. Ethel's own hand, which was flushed pink from the warm water, might have been red and blotchy, just like Clementine's face had been when they had argued. But in her mind's eye, her hand was whiter than ivory. She saw the girl resting atop her, saw the girl's dark eyes disassembling her, and she moaned. Ethel's fingers began to speed up, heedless of the water she was splashing on the floor, and the sounds she was making. She had hated herself for far too long. Why couldn't she love herself now? What was so wrong about that? The girl at the church had said that Ethel was cute. She'd called her adorable. She seemed to think that Ethel was worth loving. And Ethel could only hope, as her fingers explored the crevices of her body she didn't usually touch, that they would be able to see one another again. Otherwise, she really would be on her own. Ethel had felt wary while she had been walking home through the forest, but she felt even warier after her bath. Okay, I think that is a good stopping point. I'm not sure how I feel about the moans I had to do throughout this recording. So, you might be confused by me saying that, maybe, when I upload this, because I might edit those out. I'll see how I feel about them while I'm just editing out mistakes and all that. I'll see if I want to keep them in or not. I might keep them in, I might not. Probably not, we will see. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.